Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq, with daily insight on the Nasdaq-100 Index, or the NDX, which is made up of 100 of the largest domestic and international non-financial innovative companies listed right here on the Nasdaq stock market. The NDX has been the barometer for U.S. large cap growth and also one of the best performing indexes over the last decade and a half, not to mention one of the most liquid index ecosystems in the world. Joining us this afternoon, we have Ryan McCormack, QQQ Equity ETF Strategist at Invesco, to discuss weekly trends in the Nasdaq-100 as September and the third quarter of 2020 comes to a close. And Ryan, what a quarter it was and what a quarter for Q4 is going to be on many levels. So let's start with weekly performance.
Yep. So on a weekly basis, QQQ outperformed at the S&P 500, up 1.22% versus the S&P up 0.63. Extending to the yearly performance, where Q's is up 30.39% versus the S&P up about 4.7, which is good for nearly 26 percentage points of outperformance. So kind of extending that lead over the past week.
Yeah, it certainly has. And if we take a look at monthly performance, which of course was a tricky one for stocks, certainly since March.
Yeah, it tells a different story than the weekly and the year to date, but QQQ down 6.46% for the month through yesterday, S&P down 4.59%. And, I think we talked about early in the month, you saw that really challenging week that Q's performance had, and that kind of weighed on it for the rest of the month. Typically, especially in an election year, when you look at September and October, you do have that volatility that starts to creep up, and this month was the worst one for the year since March. So there is some seasonality to it, but as you look today, futures started low and reversed, and now we're kind of up over 1% on both the S&P 500 and QQQ, sort of in lines for additional stimulus after comments from Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, proposing, roughly $1.5 trillion in additional stimulus. And, that kind of comes on the back of Walt Disney cutting 28,000 jobs and, questions around the airline. So, I think as you had alluded to, Q4 should be an interesting one as we await, potential good news on coronavirus treatments, whether or not we get the stimulus bill come through, and, not to mention earnings reports starting up here in just a few weeks.
It's going to be in October, November to remember for sure. Now, how about sector performance for the week? Who provided the leadership?
Yeah, so, as you look at the week, I just thought it was interesting. You see all 7 sectors that QQQ has exposure to ending up in positive territory. And with that, 6 of the 7 sectors outperform their counterparts within the S&P 500. So, or in this case, SPY. So, again, it kind of goes back to that conversation that we've been having now for months, where, the Q's differentiated holdings are playing a really big part in not only the week-to-date outperformance, but also year-to-date outperformance.
Right, and that's the perfect tee up there, Ryan. Thank you for that. To take a look at the Zoom chart, since it was added to the Nasdaq-100, certainly differentiated holding. I mean, you and I have been communicating for the past 6 months and able to produce content because of Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously it's become a very big part of our daily lives. But, you look at some of these holdings that Q's has and broader based indices do not. We talked about Tesla for a while, and I think Zoom is another great example of this. It was added to the Nasdaq-100 on April the 30th at a 17 basis point weighting. And since then, through yesterday, the stock's been up nearly 218%. And that's on the back of explosive revenue and earnings growth. I mean, unsurprisingly, given this huge, dynamic shift to working and learning from home, right? The need for that digital communication has skyrocketed. But they've had expanded partnerships with companies of various sizes, and on the back of that performance, it's now a 74 basis point weighting in QQQ. So a prime example of that differentiated return, differentiated holding, enjoying this unbelievable stock return, and has obviously transferred that value to shareholders of QQQ.
All right, Ryan, thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks very much, Jill.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.